It's supposed to start at 12:15, is that right? 12:15 is start time. All right. I don't know, yeah. I don't know what it looks like. Oh, here we go. Give him a second. Where is Barbara? Okay, welcome everyone. It's nice to see you all here. It's embarrassing to me that I have to introduce myself to you, but I'm not teaching 1Ls until second semester. And half of you, a little more than half of you, will be in my constitutional law class next semester. I'm Professor Ronell Anderson-Jones. I'll get to know some of you then, and the rest of you, I hope that we'll have the chance to learn and study and get to know each other better over the next couple of years. This Synk session is a really interesting one, and you might discover a couple of minutes into it that I drew a short straw. I drew a short straw. I did some wheeling and dealing in order to get to deliver a topic that I think is important. There are two big topics that it's uniformly agreed on the faculty that you need to hear about from us personally pretty early on in your law school career. One is an incredibly exciting, super happy, fun one, and the other is a big fat downer that somebody definitely has to talk to you about, and nobody is really eager to do so. So I'm one of the people in the faculty that is most dedicated to the big, happy, exciting topic. That is the topic of judicial clerkships. I'm a missionary for the cause, and anybody who has met me and anybody who's spent any time in a classroom with me knows that you're not going to escape law school without me talking to you about them. I guess as payment for getting to spend the second half of this session talking to you about the exciting topic of judicial clerkships, I get to spend the first half of the session tackling the less happy one, which is plagiarism and academic dishonesty. So we're going to pretend that we have two separate sessions here. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde are going to present, and we'll do them in order so that we leave on pleasant terms with each other and that you will come by my office to talk to me about judicial clerkships. I think that the truth is that it's also a massive upside to be able to talk to people really, really early on about plagiarism. And maybe one of the reasons, in addition to my deal making that put me in a position to talk about this, is that I was one of the faculty members just last year who had to deal with a pretty significant case of this. And I think the deans know that it literally broke my heart. It broke my heart to sit across the desk in my office with this student and to have to work through the issue and to talk about the consequences of the issue, and to particularly to see what I sincerely saw as just a lack of thorough information about the contours of our plagiarism policy and about the things that lead to it. And so I'm committed myself to make sure that other people don't find themselves in that situation. And I think it's really, really important that we talk about it head on, really early on in your law school experience, and really that we urge you in the strongest possible terms not to succumb to the temptation to be academically dishonest, because one slip can really, really have a lifetime of consequences. In the last decade, I have seen students get expelled from law school after a first year of incredible successes, throwing away a ton of hard work and tainting their reputations forever as a result of those sorts of mistakes. I've seen people who actually already walked at graduation and secured jobs at good law firms have to lose their diplomas and their jobs because of a hastily written final semester seminar paper that had plagiarism problems. I've seen people have to break the news to their families and friends that they can't sit for the bar because the law school is required, literally has no choice but to fill out a form on every student who graduates from this law school, reporting any incident of plagiarism or academic dishonesty that occurred during the 3 years here. Now, I would start with the horror stories, but you should know, recently, this is not, it's not a story I'm totally proud of, but recently I had the opportunity to spend some time at traffic school, the details of which are not important, but that my children could share with you. And we watched 3 movies. I wrote down the names of them because I thought you would enjoy them. The 3 movies over the 3 weeks of traffic school were titled Scared Straight, Mechanized Death, and Highways of Agony. They were super fun. They were just these horror stories like Carnage, right? Carnage designed to spook us into obeying speed limits. And I so do not want this conversation to sort of take that turn where it's just a series of scare stories, mostly because I really, really hope that you do not think that the primary reason to act with integrity is to avoid punishment. It's definitely true that we have no choice but to level some pretty significant consequences against you if you behave inappropriately in this area, but there are many more important reasons for us to be having these conversations, the biggest one of which is the nature of the endeavor that we're engaged in here. Integrity has value far beyond the mere avoidance of punishment. I want to show you a picture. This is my daddy. I grew up on a farm in northern Box Elder County, just south of the Utah-Idaho border. And when I came home on break during my first year of law school, I had gotten what my dad politely called too big for my britches. I overheard him having a conversation over the phone with some character by the name of Cody. And he was promising to do this substantial amount of work for this guy, Cody, whom he'd never met, in exchange for Cody promising to loan him a piece of agricultural equipment much, much, much later in the harvest season. And when he hung up, I launched into this whole speech about contract law and how I had learned about all these deals, and I had described to him how his agreement with this cowboy Cody was unwise and potentially unenforceable and totally foolish, and how did we know that Cody was going to live up to his word? And my father was completely unmoved. And he said to me, "Old Mel Kupfer connected me with Cody. And old Mel says that Cody's word is good, and if he went back on his deal, he'd be harming me, but he'd also be harming old Mel, and nobody would do that. And so I'm in great shape." And it turned out that my father had really wise views on this, and that exactly 6 months later, Alan Greenspan gave a Harvard University commencement address that basically made the identical point about goodwill, its commitment to the bottom line, and the way that trust plays this incredibly valuable, economically valuable role in our society, in our courts, and in our economy. And the goodwill about which my dad and Greenspan spoke is really just sort of an accounting term for integrity and respect and trust. And it's the sorts of things that we've already learned about in the course of our ordinary lives. The people that we respect and the people that we trust hold together our relationships. But integrity is also something that goes to the very heart of what an academic institution, and especially a law school, does. So at the end of your time here in law school, we're not going to, cut you a check for having finished law school. We don't pay you for doing, that would be fantastic if we did. That would make it all totally worth it, wouldn't it? But what we instead hand you is a credential. We actually call it that. Here's your credential. And it comes from the Latin word credentia, which means trust. We are actually vouching for you. In essence, the law school certifies to the world upon your graduation that you're entitled to the confidence and trust of your clients. So you guys are Cody, and we are saying, like old Mel, Theo Davis is a man of his word. Callie Stone is a person of integrity. Sierra Hansen is someone who can be trusted to do important work. Logan Williams will be someone you're glad you hired. I don't know any of those people, but I'm going to meet them next semester. And then I'm going to raise your hand if you're one of those people. Oh, hi. See you next term. Yeah. At the end of next term, I will feel qualified to vouch for these folks. And when you graduate, the state bar will do the same. When you become a member of the state bar, the bar is certifying that same thing. So before a person becomes admitted to the bar, they undergo a background check by the FBI. The Character and Fitness Committee of the State Bar conducts its own background investigation of your moral character. You're going to have to call your mom and ask your mom for all the addresses you ever lived. My mom has a little notebook where she wrote in hand all the dorm addresses where she sent me packages in college and all the places where I lived for 1 month and then moved to other roommates. And you just have to keep track of all of this. It's a very, very thorough investigation. And as part of this investigation, they ask your law school dean to complete a certification form on which we are obligated to report any incidents of plagiarism or other academic dishonesty. And rigorously reviewing your honesty, it really is not just an old-fashioned piety on the part of the bar and the bar commissioners. They're looking at it as a job qualification, because if a lawyer loses the trust of her clients or the trust of the courts or even the trust of opposing counsel, the lawyer is unlikely to be effective. This is what we do for a living. We build and maintain relationships of trust. And so they're finding out whether you're trustworthy at the outset. And this privilege just brings with it these corresponding duties for which the lawyer is accountable to the public. And in the end, we really think that if lawyers can't live up to the duties, we can't expect to retain this privileged position. It's just that simple. Okay, so if we can all agree that academic integrity is a basic job qualification for lawyers and a virtue to which we all aspire, and if we can all agree that we would like to avoid the punishments for misbehavior in this area, why does it still happen? Why does it still occur? Why every year do we have a case or two where the deans have to get involved with academic dishonesty allegations? And I think it's really worth asking the question, right? It's worth considering for a moment why it is that people fall into problems with academic dishonesty. I think some clear information from me about why other people, and let's be clear here, other good people have found themselves in trouble on this front will give you a sense of why you yourself ought not be brushing this off as something that happens to other people and wouldn't happen to you. Understanding, I think, the causes and the sources of temptation can help us all be as vigilant as we need to be on this front. So I want to just offer a couple of observations on some potential causes. First, and by November of the first year of law school, I realized that I am preaching to the choir here. Law school is filled with pressure. This is just an announcement in November that I'll let you know. It places some people under the most pressure that they have felt in their entire academic lives. The workload is significant. Being graded along a curve alongside so many hardworking and accomplished classmates can be stressful. The deadlines in law school might be firmer than they were in your prior academic work. And with all of these pressures, the temptation to cut corners can be great. And one of the reasons that we emphasize academic dishonesty and academic honesty so much in law school is that if the pressures of law school cause you to be dishonest, the chances of you practicing with professional integrity will be small. Because the temptations are only going to get greater in practice. Time pressures will be greater, particularly as you add other responsibilities at home and in the community and elsewhere, and the stakes will be higher. It could be a person's liberty or their life or their job or their fortune or their reputation that's on the line. So recognizing that these kinds of workload pressures can tempt even previously strong people toward academic dishonesty, let us just mark here that it is wise to get things done ahead of, or at least on, a steady schedule, so that you're not faced with last-minute, important, unfinished projects, or the panic that sometimes drives even otherwise upstanding people to do things that they later very much regret. Keep yourself out of that situation altogether. Second, and relatedly, another source of temptation to act dishonestly can be feelings of inadequacy that people experience in law school. All of you are very, very accomplished, but if my own experience is any guide, my guess is that most of you have at least one point in the last couple of months sat in your class and felt inadequate. If you're like me, you might be hearing classmates respond and think, how come I didn't think of that? Or I can't imagine that I could ever sound that articulate, or I have no idea what anyone is talking about right now. Please know that it is perfectly normal to feel lost. During much of my first year of law school, I was completely and totally at sea. I recently stumbled upon an old binder of mine where I took handwritten notes. I'm better at handwritten notes because the ideas go into my mind through my head, and so even long after I started doing other work on a laptop, I took notes by hand in class, and it's a real treat to look back at some of those. In the margins, I would leave notes for myself, so I'd write the notes that the professor said, right, or that people would say in class in the main portion, and over in the margins, it's little sort of panicky messages from me to me, right, and they say things like, who on earth was Sophocles? Look that up, right? Or what is that word he keeps saying? Is it culpable? Look that up. And there's one where I have written in phonetics, not at all close to the right spelling, stare decisis, and then like 15 question marks, because I have no idea what this word means. And a little note to myself, look that up, right? And look, things turned out okay for me. I am a tenured professor of law and hold a chair at the very best law school in the country, and everything's fine. And if you feel at sea during this first semester of law school, it is okay. Just relax and keep going. Things will come. We will help you. You will be fine. But nevertheless, to our larger point here, even when you start to better understand the law, you may still feel the pressure to appear a bit smarter or a bit better than your classmates. And please don't let the competition sway you to lose your integrity. If we cheat because we fear that we might appear inadequate, there is a real cycle here, right? Our fear of being found inadequate only grows when we do that sort of thing. And so the dishonesty hasn't really solved a problem, it's just compounded one. And so we have to be really, really careful not to let ourselves fall into that trap. I have total confidence that each of you has the capacity to succeed as a law student and as a lawyer. All jokes aside, we really are a very, very good law school. We are lucky enough that we do not have to admit anyone who cannot succeed. We're vetting you pretty closely. I took a look personally at a lot of your files. They're impressive. So if it takes you a little bit longer or if a classmate seems a bit brighter, that's okay. The price of success cannot be losing your integrity. You have to keep yourself on track. Okay, now another reason that academic dishonesty is widespread, of course, is that it is so ridiculously easy. And this is not, I'm not helping my cause here to announce to you how easily you could go about this, but we'll loop back around later to a slide that says, I will catch you, and then you'll see. All right, as in other respects, the internet is a great source of power if used wisely, and it is also brings incredible opportunities for greater mischief. Broader and more current research is totally possible today, but so is cutting and pasting. And this can heighten the temptation for people to do it, and it can lead you to believe that everybody else is doing it. And I just want to be really clear here. Everybody else is most assuredly not doing it, and what is easy is definitely not what is right in this context. Finally, let me note the thing that in many respects makes me the very most nervous for you, and that is academic dishonesty that is the result of sloppiness. This happens all the time, and it can be so, so problematic. The storyline goes like this. A person is working on an academic paper. She's in a seminar. We'll call it media law or gun rights and policy, just because those are the ones I teach. Okay, and she does some sort of first-level searching of relevant sources, and she makes a big, mushy document on her computer filled with a lot of research that might prove helpful as she moves forward. Some language that is powerful on the topic, some ideas that are worth developing more, some bits that she wants to use and quote from various sources. And the footnotes and the tricky work of attributing everything are going to come later, she says. But then those attributions get lost in the fray, and things get a little messy, and she cuts and pastes and moves things around. And words and sentences and ideas that are not hers become assertions of hers in the paper. You can't do that. Be a careful student. Be a careful scholar. Be a careful lawyer. Failing to exercise that kind of care when you are in law school is academic dishonesty. And so you have to not be negligent in the care that you exercise as you're trying to put together your work. On this front, I want to spend just a couple of more minutes teasing out the issue of plagiarism. And I want to do this because there is a surprising level of confusion among students about what counts as plagiarism. So I just want to be as clear as we can be about this right at the outset. Plagiarism is the failure to give sufficient attribution to the words, ideas, or data of others that has been incorporated into a work which an author submits for academic credit or other benefit. This means that you commit plagiarism when you write a paper in which you use not just somebody else's words, but also somebody else's ideas or somebody else's research without crediting that other person in an effort to make it look like you yourself came up with the idea or wrote the powerful sentence or collected the data or researched the law. All of those combine to be the sum total of plagiarism. It is, of course, plagiarism if you're using the verbatim or essentially verbatim words of somebody else without citing the source of that language. Everybody knows that. That's just cutting and pasting and taking somebody else's stuff as your own. This you probably already knew, but listen closely, please. It is also reportable plagiarism of the sort that can get you dismissed from law school and render you ineligible for the bar to do something that might seem less than that to you. So, for example, you may not use the verbatim or essentially verbatim words of another without putting quotation marks around the borrowed language, even if the appropriate citation is given. Even if you're giving me a footnote that tells me where it comes from, if you didn't put quotation marks around the words that are identical to someone else's words, you've committed plagiarism. You may not use the original ideas of another, even if they're expressed entirely in your own words, without citing to the source of those ideas. So, for example, if you're using a really, really interesting law review article as a source for your paper, and you cite to all the good sources that this article uses, but you don't cite to that article itself, that is, the article that compiled all of this good stuff that you are now using, that was the way that you found out all of this information, you are violating our plagiarism policy. So please note, especially, that even if you are paraphrasing the language of another, if your paraphrase is too close to the original, you're running the risk of a plagiarism charge. Now, you're going to spend quite a bit of time on the details of citation in your legal research and writing classes. And the people who teach those are some of the best in the country, so you're in great hands. You're going to learn from them all of the nuances of the complicated citation form that we have in the law, and you're also going to learn from them that citation is more important in the law than in anything you ever did in undergrad. In a system where citation to authority and precedent is critical to persuasive argument, it's important that you be able to cite and accurately communicate the location and the nature of the authority and the nature of the precedent. But listen here, even though the technicalities of citation can be quite complex, please don't be fooled into thinking that this is somehow just like a hair-splitting law thing, right? That this is a technical thing, this is a complexity thing. Plagiarism is not a technical citation issue. Plagiarism is a moral issue. It's as fundamental as telling the truth and not stealing things that aren't yours and not bearing a false witness about your own work. It's that basic. So what I want to do now is to lay out a couple of basic ideas, just some rules of the road, if you will, sort of give you marching orders so that you'll feel confident going forward. They may feel quite obvious, but man, you would be surprised at how often they come up. And before I go over these, I want to tell you a quick story about an exchange I had a couple of years ago with my daughter, who was then probably 7 or 8. I had just gotten a new iPhone, and I was setting up individual ringtones for everybody so that I could hear and be like, that's my mom calling. I can ignore that for a sec because she's going to call like 50 more times. Or I would hear, this is the home phone, so it's probably one of my kids calling, and I need to communicate to myself the urgency of picking up. And so I proposed that for the home phone, to signal the urgency, I would do something like this. And my daughter said to me, oh no, Mama, you can't use that one. That's the noise that goes off in your head when you're about to cheat. And I was like, okay, what? So I was a little happy that she has a noise that goes off in her head when she's about to cheat, but also that she was that familiar with it and that it had a clear noise. I was a little uncomfortable with the depth of her experience. But my point is, you got to get an alarm system, right? You've got to have a system in place where when alarm bells go off, you do not ignore them. And so as I work you through some of these sort of big picture guidelines about plagiarism, please set that internal alarm and listen to it down the road when you start writing significant projects in seminars and elsewhere. And listen to it when it warns you on any one of these fronts that we're going to go over. All right, first and foremost, if you are in doubt, cite. Talk with someone. Ask what they think. It's usually simpler and easier to just add the citation. If you feel awkward asking about whether you need a citation, you probably need one. You know the answer already, okay? If you find yourself thinking, if I cite this, there's just going to be all these citations, and it's going to look like this is just a collection of citations and that I didn't do enough of my own thinking or research. You have your answer there, right? If you're saying that sort of thing to yourself, that's an alarm that's going off about plagiarism. Okay, this is a very common one. If I put so many quotation marks around this, it will make it seem like there aren't very many of my own words. That's because there aren't very many of your own words, right? That is a moment at which you need to think about what your own original contribution is to this paper. And if you don't have enough of an original contribution, that's a problem separate and apart from the stuff that we're talking about here. Go and talk to your professor. Sit down and think about what it was that drove you to talk about this particular issue. What is it that made this interesting to you? What unique thing do you have to say here? But if you're worried about quotation marks because it looks like there are too many of them, that's an alarm bell that should be going off for you. Here's one on which I was nearly embarrassed right out of the legal academy because of a research assistant's error that was only drawn to my attention by a set of editors later on down the road. If the thought goes through your head, oh, look, there's this long list of cases that somebody else has already used in a citation, in a footnote in their piece. And it has the exact same kinds of cases that I need to support my thing. And I won't be taking any of their sentences or any of their ideas, just this long list of sources that they've already compiled. Using it will save me time, and it will make it appear as though my point is especially well supported. Why is this not making? No, don't do that. That should set off an alarm bell for you on the plagiarism front. Don't fool yourself by saying, I'll leave out multiple quotations because it looks choppy. If there are so many quotes that it's choppy, you probably need to work harder at paraphrasing or amplifying. If any kind of explanation or justification is formulating in your mind for why quotation marks around or citations to material that isn't yours ought to be removed, you need to imagine that as an alarm bell. Basically, you need here to be working overtime to be honest with yourself, because you can rationalize anything, right? Neither I nor anyone else can describe enough rules to you, but you have a conscience, and I think now that we've discussed sort of the ordinary contours of the problem, the alarm bell will go off. You're going to talk in your seminars a whole lot about these sorts of issues. You're going to have plenty of chances to have feedback back and forth with your professor and with your classmates in your seminar who will be reading your material. And so you just need to keep yourself apace, right? Always be thinking about this issue, have it at the forefront, and when the alarm bell goes off, heed it, and then you will be fine. And along the way, keep in mind those reasons that we discussed for why plagiarism sometimes occurs. So get things done ahead of, or at least on, a steady schedule. Be careful from the beginning to keep track of where things are. Be organized in your research. Pace yourself. And if you find yourself putting things off and saying things like, oh, I have a whole bunch of good sources, and they're going to come together at the last minute in a really good paper because all I need are lots of pieces and then just to put some glue to hold them together, that's an alarm. That's an alarm bell that should put you in a place where you're feeling nervous about accidentally treading into territory where you don't want to be. And, not to put too fine a point on it, let me state the obvious here. If you violate our plagiarism rules, we will catch you. Even if one were inclined to plagiarize because of the ease with which it can be done, common sense should also tell that same person that the technology and the technological advances that make plagiarism easier and easier to commit also make it increasingly easy to detect. So not only are we professors quite adept at distinguishing what is and isn't your work. A couple of years ago, I had a student turn in a paper that had a paragraph that I really, really recognized. And it was from a paper that I had co-authored. So don't be that stupid. But also, right, if you're taking a seminar from someone, if you're taking a criminal law seminar from Paul Cassell, or you're taking a health law seminar from Professor Brown, right, these are people who have read everything that there is in this area, right? They have read on this topic. So their internal instincts are going to be really strong on this. But beyond this law school has invested in several very sophisticated plagiarism detection software programs that make our job even easier. And to protect the integrity of the institution and the power of our brand name that all of your classmates are depending on, we use it very, very regularly. Every single seminar paper, I can assure you, will be run through this detection software. So if in doubt, cite. If in doubt, ask a friend or a professor. Come by and see me. If you have messed up and you have not spent the time that you should on something, remind yourself that it is far, far, far better to face a slightly lesser grade than it is to face dismissal or disbarment or professional ruin. Just listen to your alarm bells. Always be honest with yourself because your career and your peace of mind depend upon it. And here's the thing. I am totally confident that you can do this. These are not these are not conflicting slides. Both are totally true. And I'm really genuinely excited for you guys. This is the moment that I love the most, the sort of, you've got enough law school under your belt that you're sort of starting to get the groove of it. You're starting to see yourselves in this role. We're starting to see the sort of cogs turning in your mind, and you're starting those first couple of days. I hate speaking at intro to law because everybody's just so wide-eyed and like unaware of what lies ahead. By November, like you're in it, friends. You're in it for better or for worse, and a little of each, right? But the truth is, we see in you already the kind of promise that you're showing. And I'm genuinely excited for the academic journey that you all have launched. I'm totally confident that you're going to be fantastic at it, and also totally confident that it will be worth it. Because law practiced with integrity is so ennobling. It's ennobling in a way that few other professions can achieve. It's such a remarkably powerful and rewarding feeling to participate in this kind of work. And at moments like this, right, at moments when elections are pending, for example, when democracy is sort of under the microscope, that we're reminded that what we do is so, so, so important. And you're embarking on a truly honorable and great endeavor. And your job is just to remember that people who get to do great things like this also have important obligations that accompany those opportunities. So I'm totally confident that you're going to be able to fulfill those responsibilities. Please just listen for the alarm bells and pay heed to them. Okay, that's the end, and we're not talking about, who was the bad guy? Jekyll? Totally. Hyde? Hyde's the bad guy. I had to read this last year with my 7th grader, and it's a terrible story. It's actually, it's so much worse, and the cover art is particularly, I don't know why he's been made green and buck-toothed, but yeah, a little gross. All right, are there questions about what we just talked about? If there are questions, please feel free to come by and chat with me. I'm very, very happy to have those conversations, and I'm actually happy to have those conversations later on down the road when you're in a seminar that is not mine, and you feel like you'd like to run ideas by somebody. I think it's important that we be resources for each other. Okay. All right, so a new professor has entered the room. It's so fantastic to be with you all here today to talk about something I care about so much, and that is judicial clerkships. We had, I think, a mistaken understanding for a number of years here at this law school that judicial clerkships were something that we should talk about after people were done with their 1L year. And I did a lot of persuading to say that there is no moment too early to start talking to people about judicial clerkships, letting people know what they are, why they're important, why they might want to think about doing them. And that's why we worked it in to talking about it first semester in Synk. This is unquestionably the best job in the world. I had 2 judicial clerkships, and one for Judge Willie Fletcher on the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals, and one for Justice Sandra Day O'Connor on the United States Supreme Court. And if you report this to the dean, I will deny it. But they are the 2 best jobs I have ever had in my whole life. The most enjoyable, the most fulfilling, the jobs that made me feel like my learning trajectory was incredible, my colleagues were incredible, and it's an opportunity that I want my students to think really carefully about snatching for themselves. I have a lot of slides that basically say this, but we'll just show you just these 2. It's a really, really incredible opportunity. So I just want to spend a couple of minutes talking to you about what judicial clerkships look like, what a person does in a judicial clerkship, and then give you a sense of what you might do if you want to start thinking about the possibility of one for yourself. Okay, this is me with Justice O'Connor last year. Back when I was still straightening all that hair. She is like family to me. She is so much like family to me that once she and I taught a class together at the University of Arizona after I finished clerking for her and after she retired from the Supreme Court. And she would come and stay with us for a couple of weeks every February to team teach this class about the Supreme Court. And there was this moment just before she was about to come when I was taking my little boy to soccer practice and driving the carpool home. And he was in the back seat with all those sort of soccer friends. And I said, Max, remember to tell everybody and the coach that you won't be at practice on Friday because the justice is coming to town. And one of the other little boys in the carpool said to Max, what is a justice? And Max turns and says, that's kind of like a very fancy name for grandmother. And I was mortified, totally mortified that I had not conveyed to my kid what it meant to be a justice of the United States Supreme Court, but also totally touched that from his vantage point, right? I mean, this was in probably 2005. The New York Times had probably earlier that year declared her to be the most important person in the country, and she had somehow conveyed to my kid that he was the most important person to her, and that's the kind of relationship that so many people who have clerked have with the judges and justices for whom they worked. It's an amazing mentoring relationship that you will have forever. A great chance to see sort of the inside of the judiciary, to work closely with a judge or justice, and to get sort of an insider view of the branch of government that we all, in one way or another, are going to work in the future. A judicial clerk works sort of as a mini law firm for a sitting judge, a trial court judge, an appellate court judge, a specialty court judge. So the lawyers will come, make their arguments for a particular judge, but then the judge has a team of people, and the size depends on the court and the state and the jurisdiction, between sort of 2 and 4 people who work in their chambers for the judge, who read the briefs, listen to the arguments, look over the paperwork that's being filed with the court, and advise the judge. You're on the team with the judge to help write bench memos, which are information that sort of summarizes what's come in, helping the judge make the right decision, to think about what the outcome should be. It's an incredible way to have an inside look at the judiciary and an incredibly unique learning opportunity. You're probably not supposed to say this when your bread and butter is working at an American law school, but everybody I know who has clerked said they learned more in 1 year of clerking than they did in all 3 years of law school, because it's real world experiences, real cases, making their way through, sort of boots on the ground learning, where you're thinking about what the right outcome is, rather than advocating for a particular side, which you're going to be doing for the whole rest of your life. You get this one moment to be able to just try to help a judge get it right. Clerkships are usually 1 or 2 years in length, so you think of them as sort of being the functional equivalent of a postdoc, right? Where right after law school you go, you have this intensive experience, and then you launch from it into many other really great opportunities. You get the chance to be exposed to a variety of lawyers and a variety of areas of law. I saw really, really great lawyering during my clerkship, and really, truly terrible lawyering, and I came to see which camp I wanted to live in, right? You hear the sort of candid feedback from a judge about how an oral argument went or why particular briefing was good, and you emerge significantly better to do that kind of work on the other side of it. And best of all of the law firms and public interest opportunities and government entities that are hiring know that. They know that that experience changes you, that it turns you into somebody who is more qualified, who is more capable, who is going to be more competitive at the end of the clerkship for the kinds of jobs you want. There are some jobs, some particularly elite jobs, for which certain clerkships are now coming up on being a prerequisite. So if you wanted to work in a Solicitor General's office, for example, if you want to be a judge yourself, if you're interested in academia, certain clerkships can be really, really valuable door openers for those sorts of things. It is a chance to make connections with powerful players in the field, both the judge, who, as I said, will be a lifelong mentor and friend to you, and who will give you insights. So if you go and work for a firm that practices before that court, you have the capacity to bring to your firm or to your clients or to your public interest job insights into how arguments can be made persuasively in that jurisdiction. But also the people that you work with become really incredible connections. A clerkship, having a co-clerk with other people, can give you a chance to be well connected to people who can be important in your life. It's an impressive resume line, and it opens doors to employment down the line. And so it's important to think about it in advance, right? It's important to think about how you might want to do this, and it's important to think about it before you sort of start looking at law firms who might not necessarily persuade you to go and do this, because they know that if you go and do a clerkship, other firms might find you attractive on the other end. And so sometimes thinking about your clerking plans well enough in advance that you know the timeline for advancing your own resume rather than advancing the best interest of a law firm is the right way to go. Nobody is unemployed on the other end of a judicial clerkship. And when you are seeking employment on the other end of a judicial clerkship, you have somebody who's a really great advocate in your corner, right? You have a state or federal court judge who is vouching for you and giving you a credential that's important. There is, I firmly believe, a clerkship for everyone. And I mean this in a couple of ways. There is a clerkship for people in all areas of interest, and I also think there is a clerkship for people of all class rankings. Clerkships sometimes get talked about exclusively in the context of the most competitive clerkships, clerkships at state supreme courts or at federal appellate courts that are in fact incredibly, incredibly competitive. Judges care about grades for those clerkships. They care about them pretty intensely. And so some of them are really hard to get. And we work really hard as a judicial clerkship committee to try to help people from this law school get those clerkships. There are also clerkships at state courts, at state appellate courts, and at specialty courts, so courts that do exclusively bankruptcy work or exclusively immigration work, or exclusively intellectual property work, or courts in Delaware that focus on transactional and business work. If there is an area of specialty that you're interested in, the clerkship committee can help you think about the possibility of clerkships. So I like to tell students that everybody's doing the best they can in law school, and everybody's going to work as hard as they can to get the best grades that they can secure and to have the best CV that they can at the other end of it. And then you take what you have and you tackle clerkships the way that that they say to tackle college applications, right? You've got a set of schools that you'd apply for college that you're sort of, you feel like are a good match for you given your qualifications. You've got a set of them that are your safety school, right, that you're pretty sure that you could get into, and you've got your reach, right? Yeah, a couple of places that you think, right, I might not have exactly the qualifications, but I'm going to aim for it. Clerkships are the same way, right? Everybody's strategizing and figuring out a way to sort of think about opportunities, and we can help you think about that. We can help you think about what would be a good match for you, what would challenge you. We can help you think about the kinds of careers goals you have. So if you want to be a litigator, or if you want to be a litigator in a particular area, right? You think, I really want to be a person who litigates in this particular geographic area. Okay, let's find you a clerkship in that area so that you come to be intimately related with the bar there. You get to see the judges there. You make yourself as appealing as possible to the surrounding firms. Strategizing these sorts of things early on can put you into a position where you can make great things happen for yourself. We also increasingly are seeing nationwide a trend of people who have their eye on a prize of a particular clerkship, right? They have a clerkship that they want to get, and it might be a reach clerkship for them in terms of their qualifications on graduation. It's now very, very common for people to do multiple clerkships. So you take a clerkship, you want a clerkship at the Utah Supreme Court, and your grades or your qualifications or your connections are such that you might or might not be able to get one straight out of law school, but you apply for it, you make yourself known to the justices of the Utah Supreme Court, they start to get a look at you. And then you also apply for some state court of appeals clerkships. And you nab yourself a state court of appeals clerkship, and at the end of that clerkship, you have the very best recommendation ever for the next clerkship, because it's not me, your law professor, saying, I am guessing as a result of this person's performance in class and this person's interactions with me and this person's writing sample that he or she will make a great clerk. You have a judge saying to another judge, she was a great clerk, right? You'll like her, she'll do good work. So we're happy on the clerkship committee. There are 6 of us on the faculty who are on the judicial clerkship committee. We are very, very happy to meet with you to talk about this. We're happy to hear about what your goals are. And if you think that a clerkship might be a good opportunity for you, you should start planning now. One thing that you definitely should do is start talking to the people in your life about this possibility. If there are people who are attached to you, boyfriends or girlfriends or spouses or family members who are engaging in life planning with you, this is something that I learned the hard way when I announced to my significant other in my second year of law school that I was going to apply for these clerkships, and he was like, I thought you were going to become a lawyer and start being a lawyer. I didn't know there was going to be this additional thing, this additional one-year thing that wasn't part of the deal. And we had conversations about how an investment in an additional opportunity like this would open all kinds of doors down the line, how important it is to be flexible and to think about the upsides of doing something that can really pay dividends in other job searches. And because I did so, I had a great deal of flexibility when the two of us needed to move for his job later on, that I had the qualifications to be able to do so more easily. You are going to want to talk to the clerkship committee, as I said, and to folks in the PDO about your interests. Megan Green, in particular, at the PDO, is a genius on these fronts. She is really, really tapped in to the local and national clerkship market. She can help you think about the sort of nuts and bolts of applying for clerkships. If you tell her early on, like, I'm from this place and I want to go back to that place and I want to clerk there, she can keep her eyes peeled for information on that front. You're going to want to make smart choices as to grades and as to curricular choices. Folks from the clerkship committee can help advise you about the sorts of things you might want to do when you start choosing your own classes as a 2L and 3L, the kinds of classes that you'll want to choose and the kinds of things you'll want to focus on in order to streamline your efforts to go to the clerkship of your choice. You might also want to consider a judicial internship. So a judicial internship, sometimes we call them judicial externships. They're the same thing. They're different than clerkships. A clerkship is a job you get right after law school, ordinarily straight out of law school, for a year or 2 years working for a judge. A judicial internship or externship is basically being a clerk for the clerks. It's something you do while you're in law school. You get to put yourself in chambers, you get to see how the pace of things is, you get to do a little bit of the work that law clerks do, and it can enhance a resume as you're applying for clerkships down the line. There are some judges who hire clerks out of their extern or intern pools. There are others who have the exact opposite rule, who say, I will never hire from my intern or extern pool because I don't want to set up an expectation that people who come here as an intern will necessarily get a clerkship. But those are things we can help you think through, we can help you strategize, and it's a great idea if you're thinking about doing a clerkship to try to sort of give yourself some exposure to the judicial process by enrolling in that course and doing an internship. The real things that you have on deck are by the summer after your 1L year, by your 1L summer, you're going to want to think about two really important things. You're going to want to think about having a good writing sample for clerkship applications, some of which begin as early as fall of your 2L year, although there is a national movement to try to push that a little later. Judges get really anxious and they all they keep scooting up and up and up, right? There's this joke that if they could, right, secured a clerk, right, the moment they're born at the nursery, at the hospital, they would all put their label on it because judges are, by definition, super competitive law students that never quite let go of that. There are some internal rules that particularly federal judges are now trying to abide by to sort of keep themselves from jumping the gun and getting a good set of applicants who have some law school experience under their belt. But the clerkship committee can help you think about those things. The ideal is for you to be roughly ready to be thinking about clerkships when you come back for your 2L year. And what this means is that something that you need to be thinking about during your 1L year is letters of recommendation. Think about making connections with people on the faculty who could be helpful to you in clerkship applications. And what you want is not just someone for whom you performed well, because when someone comes to me and says, you know, I got an A in your class and I would love for you to write me a recommendation letter, that's a really hard situation because I do not want to just write a letter that says the exact same thing to the judge as your transcript says to the judge. The judge has your transcript sitting right there, and if it says, in Con Law 1, she got an A, and then I write a letter that says, she's a great student, in Con Law 1, she got an A, sincerely, Ronell Anderson-Jones, that's not helping you. That is duplicative. So what we want is to be able to develop personal relationships with each other. You think about ways that you can become known to professors on this faculty who could help you with clerkships. And there are a million ways that that can happen. You can become a Quinney Fellow. You can offer to do some research. You can go into office hours and talk about the topic that you are learning about in the class that you have with them. You can offer to do some research over the summer, take on just a little research project and sort of get involved in what they're doing. You can get to know them through clubs and organizations that they are the advisor for and you are helping to organize. You can help volunteer at symposia or when guest lecturers come. There are all sorts of options that will fit your particular interests and the particular professors that you would like to get to know, but start thinking about it. The very worst thing that you can do is get all the way into your 2L year and not have developed the kinds of relationships that you'll want, and then be springing requests for clerkship recommendation letters on professors who don't have enough information on which to build. So help us help you by finding chances to spend time with professors and to get to know professors and to give them a chance to see what you can do. Okay, my final, Professor Heine is the chair of the Judicial Clerkship Committee. Everybody know Professor Heine? Everybody knows her? Okay, good. She's amazing, and she is totally dedicated to being helpful to people, and she keeps a sort of master list on behalf of the Clerkship Committee of people who have expressed to her an interest in clerking, and then we all sort of galvanize around that list and say, oh, I had that person in class and I'd love to reach out to them, or I'm happy to meet with that person about their interests, or I know somebody from Montana and so have them come by and talk to me about their Montana goals, or so forth. So make sure that you make yourself known to Professor Heine if you're interested in clerking or if you think that you might be interested in clerking. And Professor Heine's first thing that she will say to you is to get out a map. Get out a map and think about all the places you could conceivably clerk. And if that map is this big and it is Salt Lake County, she's going to wad that map up and throw it back at you because there are all of us and Salt Lake County, right? That's not going to be feasible for all of us to clerk at the same 4 courts that exist. And so people need to brainstorm the possibilities. Think about where you went to college. Think about where you grew up. Think about where you've lived in the past. Think about where you might like to practice in the future and would like to put some roots down. A clerkship is an amazing way to do that. If you brainstorm the flexibility as to geography and as to courts, we can do more to help you as we think about spreading your applications out. Okay. I have done loads of things in my life and loads of things as an academic. I've been teaching for more than 15 years, have gotten some national awards and have published in some interesting places, and still, when people introduce me, when I go to speak anywhere, they start with my clerkships. It is the way that people introduce me. And it is something that you won't be sorry that you chose to do. It's a really valuable way to get confidence as a young lawyer and to make connections that you're going to value for the rest of your career. So I really urge you to think carefully about the possibility of doing it, and also to come and visit me if I can be helpful to you. Just shoot me an email and let me know that you'd like to come by and talk. Professor Heine would love to hear from you. Others on the Judicial Clerkship Committee would also love to hear from you. So take advantage of us as a resource. What questions do you have for me right now about clerkships? Yeah. Yeah, so different judges have different attitudes about that. The question was about clerking post-graduation, applying for clerkships post-graduation. I know plenty of people who went to a firm for a year or a couple of years and then looped out of the firm to clerk and then back to the firm or back to other firms. Certainly, plenty of people in the early years of their practice do so. It's less common for people to loop out later, but I'm not sure that that's because of judges. I think that might just be because of people, right? They just get comfortable with what they're doing. I know a couple of people who went back to clerk after 6 or 7 years in practice. But there's definitely a movement towards, at least some judges like to get people fresh out of law school. They like people who are sort of not yet in the mindset of being practicing lawyers and And so there will definitely be a big wave of hiring that will happen during your second year for clerkships that are immediately afterwards. Does that help? Yeah, did I see another hand? Yeah, go ahead. sort of a hand?
Well, we were just kind of talking about what is obviously it's not about money, but...
No, it's a little bit about money, sure. It's not about money. Yeah. So neither of my clerkships paid as much as my first year at a big law firm. Both paid significantly more than being a law student. So that was great. They work on this government employee scales, so like the federal pay scale for that. So depending on where you are geographically. So I actually made more at the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals than I made at the United States Supreme Court, because it's just a flat scale for where you are physically. And San Francisco is a really expensive place to live, and DC was San Francisco was a really, really expensive place to live, and DC was just a really expensive place to live. And so I supported a spouse and a child on it. We didn't live large, but I made more money than my rancher parents made straight out of law school. There are at least some financial benefits that accrue to you on the other end. So if you have a big, incredibly impressive, prestigious law firm clerkship relationship, there are bonuses that are sometimes paid coming out of federal appellate court clerkships. Even state appellate and state Supreme Court clerkships will sometimes allow you, the firms that really value that sort of thing, firms that do appellate work, for example, or firms that have really strong litigation practices where they like people to have done clerkships, they'll count you as a second-year associate when you come. So the year that you spent there, and sometimes that means a pay raise, and often what that means is that you cut out that first year where you're mostly doing sort of document discovery and sort of the ick of the sort of bottom of the totem pole work. You get to come in at a level of experience. So there are, it is not lucrative, but you don't live below the poverty line. Is that helpful? Yeah. Ah, yes. Yeah, no, so we have lots of such situations, surprisingly, the number of people who are attached to, it shouldn't be that surprising, right? Loads of people at this stage of life are attached to other people who are at this stage of life, right? And so there's lots of movement that's happening in lots of different directions. We have had many people choose to sort of commute back and forth between someplace while clerking, because it's just a year, and it's an opportunity that guarantees or virtually guarantees that you'll get better job opportunities down the line once you do try to get to that new location where you think that you're going to land. It can also be a great way to try a location on for size, right? You sort of go there, you clerk for a year. If you fall in love with the place, you have great connections. And if you don't fall in love with the place, you have a resume line that can get you there. There are some clerkships. So Megan is the person in the PDO that you're going to want to talk to, because Megan also keeps track of sort of clerkship opportunities that come belatedly. So we, as a clerkship committee, have now started keeping really close documentation of people who, they're 3L year, they still don't have plans, and if clerkship opportunities come up and they want to be sort of slotted into them, she sends emails to that set of people who are thinking about doing it. They don't really know their 2L year, what they can do, but their 3L year they do know. She watches for those kinds of opportunities. We're really committed to trying to be helpful with people and taking them where we find them. It is in your best interest to be as flexible as you can be on the clerkship front. It'll pay dividends on the other end. But people live in the real world, right? You have your map is what your map is. And so let us help you think creatively about what you can do and what you can explore so you can get the best opportunities that are possible. Any other questions? Oh, yeah, okay. No. Yeah, you do not. I clerked in California and DC, and I am not a member of either of those bars. Most judges do not have a requirement that you sit for the geographic bar. And there's many people clerk before sitting for the bar. That is, they'll clerk, and then the summer in between their clerkship and starting, they'll take the bar then. Other people sit for the bar right after law school because they have it all in their head. I advise that. That's a good idea. Take Con Law 2 from me, and then immediately go take the bar right after that. But I sat for the Ohio bar and then left for California. Most judges have flexibility on that. Okay, as other questions come to mind, as you think about this, or you want to think about how this maps onto your own experience, give Professor Heine or me or Dean Davies a call. We're happy to talk about it some more. I'm grateful for the chance to have talked to you about both of these important topics today. Please associate me with the second one. But if you find yourself in trouble on the first one, also I hope that I could be a trusted source to help you work through that bind as well. All right, thanks. Great to meet you all.
Hi, my name is Skylar.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. I just wanted to come introduce myself because I am very interested in what I do.
Oh, excellent. Great.
So,
Tell me your last name?
Walker?
Skylar Walker. Okay. Yeah, great. Shoot a note to Professor Heine so she has your name immediately.